Nicky Reapening, and I'm the founder and CEO of Honeycomb Aeronautical, a company I started to create affordable professional flight sim equipment for student pilots, flight schools, and flight sim enthusiasts altogether. I have more than 10 years of experience making flight simulation hardware, and I've been a real pilot since 2011. So, I want to talk about how we solve the current pilot crisis and the one we will have in the future through flight simulation. So, we have a crisis in the aviation industry currently. Every airline is lacking pilots. Flights are daily being canceled because they don't have flight crews for them. Regional carriers are closing down routes, and we actually had a local airline in the San Diego area where I'm from that closed down their business altogether because they couldn't get enough pilots to support their business. So we have a real problem that we need to solve. And on top of that, the general aviation community is dying. My local flying club has 1,700 members, the biggest flying club in the world. And when I go to members meetings, the average age of the pilots there is about 70 years old, which means it doesn't take a genius to calculate that a lot of those guys will not be around 10 years from now. So we have a lot of things that we need to look at now to make sure that we keep aviation alive in the future. So short-term and long-term solutions. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to change the approach on how we look at flight training. Right now, when people come up and ask our products is if you're able to lock hours in it, and we have to say no, it turns them away. It's like it's such a focus, like almost like deers in a headlight. And what people need to focus on is not how many hours they can lock. I mean, most schools only have access to B8s and Ds, in which you can lock about 10 hours. And after that, it's not loggable anyways. You've got to focus on saving hours. And if you provide a flight training solution for student pilots, they can afford, that's actually on a professional grade, they can sit at home, flight position approaches, or even if it's VFR, turns around a point, then they can hone in their skills, they can get their motor skills turned in, and they can save a lot of hours in the real cockpit. So that's what we're trying to do, provide affordable training devices for student pilots. Almost 80% of student pilots never pass their check ride. So 80% of the people that start in ground school will never actually get a license to fly a real plane. Considering the problems we have getting enough pilots, there's a study that says that there's going to be a need of 500,000 more professional pilots between now and 2028. So if we don't look at solutions on how we approach flight training now so we can pass more pilots through, then we're not going to achieve that goal, which is going to be devastating for the airline industry. I myself had a simple flight training solution available to me when I did my license, and I passed my private license in 49 hours. In the US, the average time is 78, so I shaved off almost 30 hours because I had a flight training solution at home that I could practice with. We also need to focus on the next generation. I'm doing a lot of work with the EAA and the local chapters, getting the young eagles flight training devices they can train with, get the enthusiasm going, encourage the love of flying an airplane so that those kids want to become real world pilots. So we prepare the next generation. You can't just think 3 years ahead and see who can we educate in the next couple of years. We also need to look 10 years ahead and 20 years ahead, because the romance of flying is gone. It's not like in the 70s and 80s where everybody aspired to become a pilot. So we need to change that back so that kids dream of becoming pilots again. So what we have to do, we need to create the right tools. And I can't emphasize this enough. We need to have reasonably priced quality simulation products. We need to have products that you can use at home, but also we need to look at changing the industry standards, perception, and approach to flight training. Last week I was at the Southern Fun Air Show in Florida, and they have a campus there called the Central Florida Aviation Academy, which is a high school for kids who want to become A&Ps or pilots or professionals in the aviation industry, and they had a room with 30 flight simulators. None of them were approved. They're fairly cheap solutions, but it gave the kids an ability to go in and fly without paying $20, $30 an hour to be able to use a BATD, and they use it as a real training facility. So it doesn't have to approve to be reasonable. And you know, at the price of one of our solutions, you can get 20 of those for the price of a BATD. So it means you can fill up classroom with training devices so that you can start students young and you can pass them with fewer hours. You know, any other education you go on, if you go to university or wherever, if you're behind the curve or if you want to become better, you can go home and you can read up on your curriculum and you can become better at what you're doing, but flight training doesn't allow that. So we need to add that to the opportunities that the students have so they have a higher pass rate. So what's Honeycomb's role in this? Well, we're right now developing a modular flight training system. That means we have configurable components where you can set it up for any type of aircraft. And this is really important because if a flight school buys a approved flight simulation, then it's made for one aircraft type only. If you have a BATD for a single engine land aircraft, then that's what it's stuck with. You know, you can't change it. If you wanted one with steam gauges, that's what you're stuck with. If you build one with a G1000, then there's no configuration, you can't change this. That's the only thing. If you want multiple different types of simulators, you'll have to buy multiple different kinds of simulators at $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a unit. That significantly limits the possibility of flight schools. So we're developing a configurable component that caters to any type of aircraft and training needs. And it's affordable even for student pilots. All the components we're making is in the $200 to $300 price range, and you can gradually build up your cockpit when you're financially able. So that you can start out with a yoke, you can add our throttle, which I'll get back to in a little bit, and then you can add more components to it as you can afford it. Or if you're a flight school, aeronautical university, you can have a turnkey solution at a fraction of what a BATD costs. So what do we currently have in development? Well, our first product that we're demoing over at our stand is our new yoke. So what we're trying to do also is create a product that has as many features built in as possible. So besides from being a fairly generic yoke with a lot of programmable features, you also have a switch panel and ignition built in. It has a universal panel mounting system, so you can mount pretty much any type of panel on there that you want. Whether it's a G1000, it's a touch screen, it's radio panels from other manufacturers, make sure that it's compatible with everything. But it's very adjustable. The second product we have that's coming out a little bit later this year is a Bravo throttle coordinate. So this is how I talk about it's configurable. So right here it's shown in a twin engine setup, but all the levers are detachable. And you can set it up for a single engine land, you can set it up for a twin engine commercial, 4-engine commercial, or you can even configure it as a turboprop with thrust reversers. So you have a lot of variety and ability to customize it to any aircraft, and within minutes you can have somebody training in a single engine. The next 30-minute session you have somebody training for a turboprop aircraft. And it makes it very flexible for the flight schools to work with. On top of that, we integrated a flight, an autopilot, annunciator panel, gear levers, flap levers, trim wheel. So basically with our yoke and throttle you have everything but your primary flight displays and engine management systems in there, which you can get on screen as well. So it means for about 400 euros, you'll be able to have all the hardware you need to be able to fly an aircraft. So what do we have in future development? Well, future development is about complementing these products to complete the configurable, modular, affordable cockpit solutions. So we're going to bring out an 11.6-inch touchscreen with rotary buttons that can be configured to any type of aircraft. So again, the ability to set it up within minutes, whether it's a steam gauge cockpit with a GPS solution, a G1000 solution, or even if you want to set it up for a commercial aircraft, then it's just basically go in, turn the rotary knob to decide what aircraft you want to use, whether it's a 172, a Baron, a 737, an A350, A380, Boeing 747. You'll able to have the flight display directly built in, and within minutes you can set it up from one aircraft type to another. And we're still talking about the $200 to $300 price range for a product like that. So for a flight training solution, we're talking about €1,000 to have all these components combined to be able to set up a training solution for your student pilots or for the student pilots at home. So what else needs to be done? We need to change the system through advocacy. I met with a feeder for American Airlines about a week ago, Envoy, to talk to them about how we can use all the student pilots that buy our products to have an introduction to Envoy. And he was not interested at all because he didn't feel that we were serious enough because it wasn't a approved flight training solution. And we have about 10,000 student pilots a year that buy our products. So I would think that that would be a good match. But there is a bit of arrogance in the aviation industry about, or snobbery if you might, about what can be used and what can't be used. And we really need to change that because there's a huge advantage in accelerating the training process for flight students. Then we need to work with special interest organizations. As I said, well, before the EAA, but also NAFI, the National Association of Flight Instructors, if they create training programs for their instructors that they could use, so they have, let's call it homework. You go home, you have these training sessions that you have to do homework. We could have a software program that documents what they're doing and giving us point scoring system with like, oh yeah, you're shooting in position approaches. Your score for these approaches were this. You'll probably get in our software system that can do a better evaluation of the student pilot than the flight instructor will be able to do. So there's some real opportunities here in creating systems that can be used alongside the existing flight training program and can accelerate the learning process. So the EAA with the Young Eagle Scouts, again as I said, preparing the next generation of pilots, the ones that are going to be 16 and able to start the training process in 6 years from now. We still got to start that now. So they want to be that instead of architects. And then of course the interest organization. AOPA can put pressure on the JAA and the FAA to change how the standards for the rules for Part 1, 141, Part 61 schools. I'm not sure what they call it in Europe, but open up to home training syllabus as an aid to the current flight training program. And then of course work with the airlines, as I said. If we can feed the airlines into the regionals students at a younger age with a better skill set, then we can also much faster deliver what's needed for the airline industry to keep afloat with pilots at the moment. So, but this is something that we need to start now because it's going to take several years until we ramp up to the level where we need to be. So, a lot to go, but for now, obviously anybody who's involved in the industry, advocate please, and we'll do our part and develop the products that's needed. And if you want to go try them out, we're right over here in 510. And that's all I had to say. Thank you very much for listening.